In today's show, it's a mailbag episode answering questions about skill sets, toughness, and the seller's market this summer. Welcome to Locked On Blazers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Trailblazers, your daily Portland Trailblazers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, world? It's your past first point guard and Trailblazers reporter, Mike Richmond. You are listening to another episode of Locked On Blazers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get podcasts and also on YouTube. Thanks for making this show your first listen. It's Locked On Blazers, your team every day. In today's show, we're doing a mailbag episode answering listener-submitted questions all episode long. If you want to get a question in the show, the best way to do it is to email me, lockedonblazerspod@gmail.com. We're going to do these more regularly in the offseason because there's just a lot of space between games. But the best place to submit a question, lockedonblazerspod@gmail.com. I will drop that email in the episode description. I also occasionally from time to time will solicit questions on Twitter. So if you're into that, my Twitter handle is @MikeGRich. But again, the email address is the place to do it. I'm telling ya. So let's get into it. We got questions today about the skill sets the Blazers need to acquire, the type of personalities the team might want to add to be competing at the highest level, and then finally the challenge of a seller's market this summer and how it might impact the Trail Blazers. As we look ahead to what shapes the next iteration, I think all of these questions from listeners kind of give us a sense of the challenges and the focus that this offseason will demand. So the first question comes from @NerdRunner on Twitter, who asks, what skill sets need to be added to the Blazers roster in order of priority? Rank the most important skill sets. I like this as a question because the specificity of who do they need to add, right? Like that's what many questions are. Who are some mid-level exception targets? Who can they get on the trade market? Who are some reasonable replacements for Jusuf Nurkic? Those are all important questions that we will answer. But right now, the biggest thing between sort of clarity on who they should pursue and where they are, like the thing that allows us to have clarity is the draft lottery. Because the Blazers, with their fifth worst record in the league and 10.5% odds at landing the number one overall pick and landing Victor Wembanyama, that is a game changer, right? And if they don't land there, if they don't have Wemby, and we're not all incredibly excited about a franchise-changing player, then they're going to drop, if they drop into that 2 through 5 range, I think 5 is really unlikely, 2.2%, but 2 through 4 range, that is ammo to make trades and make it happen. If they drop back, very likely they drop back. Like, it's just how the lottery works. 6, 7, it's like less ammo, right? Deeper in the draft, top 5 picks, coveted. 7th overall pick, less coveted. And so then they're very likely, they've basically said as much. I think it's been first reported by Jason Quick of The Athletic, but anyone paying half a bit of attention can know that, like, they have telegraphed, we're going to trade this lottery pick. We're going to. Unless it's Victor Wembanyama, you're not going to trade the friggin' generational talent, but if it isn't one, they're going to trade it. They're going to try to trade it. They're going to package it with almost certainly Anthony Simons and try to upgrade the front court. That is just very, very clearly the plan. I don't know that Joe Cronin laid that out like word for word, but it's very obvious in the sort of media, public comments that he's done, is that's how the Blazers are going to approach this. So we will get to a point once we know the draft lottery of like, okay, what do they need? Who do they need? How are they going to get it? We will get to the specifics, I promise you. But right now, they are just holding 10.5% odds. And if they end up with Wemby, game changer, changes totally your approach, right? Because all of a sudden you have a long tail chance to be very good with the generational talent. If they don't, the urgency to upgrade now matters. So that's why I like this question about not like which players yet, but which skill sets. And kind of regardless of what the Blazers end up in the lottery, these skill sets are going to matter. So I ranked my top 5 most important skill sets for the Blazers to add. Number 1 is rebounding. It's rebounding. They were bottom 10 in the league in offensive rebounding, bottom 10 in the league in defensive rebounding, 22nd in both offensive rebound percentage and defensive rebound percentage, according to NBA.com. They were bad on the glass, and they're very likely to re-sign Jeremy Grant's. If assuming everything goes to their plan and they keep Damian Lillard, Jeremy Grant's going to be in the fold. They're going to give him a whole bunch of money. Again, we'll talk about that when we get there. But like, Jeremy is not a good rebounder and never has been. He's not going to suddenly become that at 29 years old. He is what he is. He's a light rebounding power forward. That's a problem. Jusuf Nurkic at some points in his career has anchored a very, very good defensive rebounding team. It was also in a more conservative defensive scheme that probably prioritized getting defensive rebounds as opposed to being, adding more pressure on the perimeter. And nowadays, I think it is hard to play drop coverage without length to chase the ball. I don't think you can do, you gotta, plenty of teams are playing drop in the playoffs and Jusuf Nurkic is a drop big where you drop back from the pick and roll, but you gotta have length around him to truly make it work and truly make it happen. If you're not playing drop and you're asking Nurk to be up, he's going to be farther away from the rim and you're going to rebound a little bit less, which means other folks, the wings and the guards, have to crash back and rebound. If you're going to have a low-level rebounder in Jeremy Grant, and depending on whether Nurk's on the roster or not, you're still going to have this pretty similar defensive scheme under Chauncey Billups. You just need to add more rebounding. You need to add more guys who can rebound, more people who can work the boards. The Blazers need to be better than bottom 10 on both sides of the ball in rebounding. If you don't get extra possessions on offense and you give up a bunch of extra possessions on defense, you're going to struggle, particularly if your point of attack defense is bad. So the next two skill sets, rim protection, the Blazers absolutely need someone to be able to clean up the backside. Nurk is not quite that. Nurk's not a negative defender. He's just he's not as good as he once was pre-injury, and I think the scheme specifically the Blazers run doesn't allow for Nurk to kind of sit in the paint and camp and be a rim deter, because he's not like this big vertical defender that gets up to 12 feet and makes it tough. He's just a really big person, and when he's in the way, he can be a really big person in the way. But if he's out at 29 feet at the level, corralling the ball handler and then recovering, that recover is a long way. And sometimes there were just straight up times this season when Nurk's effort waxed and waned, and the waning part was really an issue, and they missed that. They need more rim protection. They just need it. 3 is point of attack defense. I think you could quibble that point of attack defense should be over rim protection, but for me, you protect the rim, then it kind of covers up point of attack defense as opposed to vice versa. So I rank that in that order. They just need someone who could guard the ball really well. They tried to have that be Jeremy Grant. It's not his skill set. He's better at guarding slower folks and playing a little bit of help defense. They need someone who can lock down at the point of attack. They thought they had that with the Gary Payton signing. They thought that Josh Hart was going to get that assignment. He never did. Chauncey Billups never gave him that role, which I thought was a little bit weird. And a little bit of Justice Winslow, more positive defenders to guard that spot. Winslow might not be back. Josh Hart's already gone. Gary Payton's already gone. They need point of attack defense desperately. It's the thing they've kind of been searching for, and they still haven't found it. Rebounding, rim protection, point of attack defense. Number 4 is playmaking. They need to relieve some of the playmaking pressure from Damian Lillard. Every time he does it a little bit, but he's not a natural great playmaker. And Dame isn't this he's not like Stockton. He's not even Trae Young in terms of savant playmaking. He is a really good get into the teeth, draw defense, make a play. He's by far the Blazers' best playmaker. I think his passing is greatly improved from early in his career. I think there are people who think Dame is bad at passing. I would strongly disagree with that. But he's not he's a scorer, right? He's a scorer, and then he uses his scoring gravity to set up his teammates. The Blazers could use someone else who could help Dame not have playmaking be dependent on his scoring gravity. Just someone who could really, really just make some plays off the bounce, set people up, get people into their spots, make the defenses pay for putting pressure on Dame by making smart plays behind the ball. They could absolutely need that. They absolutely need that. They could absolutely use that. That's what I was trying to say. And 5, the 5th most important skill set is shooting. They were a little light on shooting this year, and I think it's the reason why their starting group wasn't overwhelming. They were kind of, Josh Hart was maybe playing out of position, but just a little bit lack of shooting and lack of saying okay, well, let's pull Hart out and put in this shooter. They didn't have that. I think Shaedon Sharpe can be that, but he's not he's not a spacer, catch and shoot guy. I think he can be. But he wasn't this year necessarily. And he's just such a good slasher that you don't want him just like park him in the corner and like turn him into Luke Kennard. You want him to use his whole varied skill set. So more shooting is absolutely a skill. Or absolutely a need. So the 5 skills in order I think the Blazers need to address this offseason: rebounding, rim protection, point of attack defense, playmaking, and shooting. They need it. They need to upgrade it. But to me, thinking about it as skills, like we need someone who addresses these skills, is better than specifics, because the draft lottery will determine what they do next. A couple weeks away, 2 weeks away. Going to be a really fun night for perhaps this franchise, but some franchise is going to get really lucky, and a fascinating night for what's next for the Blazers. All right, in the second segment, got another question about personalities, people who talk smack, and if the Blazers need a little more fire. That's what we'll talk about in segment number 2. But first, I want to tell you that this show is sponsored by BetterHelp. It's so easy to get caught up in what everyone else needs from you and never take a moment to think about what you need from yourself. But when you spend all your time giving and helping folks, it can leave you feeling stretched out and thin, burned out, and therapy can give you the tools to find more balance in your life so you can keep supporting others without leaving yourself behind. I think therapy is an incredibly useful tool for when you are experiencing a acute traumatic event. Something bad has happened in your life and you want to be able to talk to someone and work through it. But I also think the importance of just understanding yourself, the routine maintenance on your brain and what you are thinking and how those thoughts affect your interactions and why you're having those thoughts is incredibly valuable for just keeping yourself on track. It is a useful tool for the moments that you really need it, and it's a useful tool when you're just cruising over speed bumps along the way. So if you've been thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Find more balance with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. All right. Let's keep it rolling with the mailbag. If you got questions, make sure to send them in. LockedOnBlazersPod@gmail.com. That email address is in the episode description, so check it out. All right, our next question comes from Julio Cantu, who asks, a lot of big personalities, fiery dudes on these playoff rosters. Do the Blazers have enough attitude to hang? Julio notes that I can recall our 2019 Western Conference Finals run, our being a collective pronoun, shout out to Julio, with CJ McCollum, Seth Curry, Evan Turner, Zach Collins. These were spicy dudes. Yeah, in that playoff run, Seth Curry famously called the Denver Nuggets a bunch of sassy frontrunners. An all-time great quote. And I worry a little bit that this season the Blazers turned into a little bit of some sassy frontrunners. I don't know that they need jerks necessarily. Like, Dillon Brooks is going to be a free agent this summer. According to reporting from The Athletic and ESPN, the Memphis Grizzlies have made it known that Dillon Brooks is not going to be re-signed in Memphis. And I'm not even saying that people think he should sign with the Blazers, but like Brooks is that type of guy, right? He talks an incredible amount of smack. He shows up wearing a vest and no shirt to the arena. He's like embraces being a villain until he loses and then refuses to talk to the media. Skips out and loses himself $25,000 in the process, but he embraces being a jerk, right? I don't know that the Blazers need that skill set necessarily. Side note, incredibly bizarre reporting around Dillon Brooks. Incredibly bizarre. That's for another show. I'll let someone else unpack that, but incredibly bizarre. I don't know that the Blazers need that personality, right? I don't think they need Ja Morant talking about running up the chimney because they don't duck any smoke or that they're fine in the West. I don't know that they need Patrick Beverley, who's telling his former teammates that they're too small, only to lose a couple nights later. I don't know that they need that. I think they could use like the ideal version of Draymond, but I don't know that they need like what like the baggage of Draymond, right? Is the smack talking and all that stuff. I think what they need, and this is a listener, Dr. J, sent this email a while ago. Shout out to Dr. J, longtime listener to the program, that the Blazers are a little light on physicality. That they might not need that fieriness, but that someone who's like just willing to mix it up and get into the mess and be physical and be hard to play against is what they need. You will recall, join me in the Wayback Machine briefly, that heading into the season, Chauncey Billups said he wanted the Blazers to be the team that nobody wanted to play against. That was his like sort of ideal vision for what this team was going to be, is the team that nobody wanted to play against. They weren't that at all. This team was sweet. They had to score 115 to have a chance in the game. They were not going to be, they were, I don't know if the Blazers got bullied this year, but they were never the team that enforced their style and enforced their will on anybody. Never. They just didn't do it. I think that one of the things they need are just more dudes on the roster willing to get really physical and willing to play a physical style of basketball. I think that's kind of what Chauncey Billups envisioned, and maybe he was just saying the right things, but he never engendered that with his group. He never instilled that with his group. They were not that ever. They were not the team that nobody wanted to play against. They were the team that lost by 56 in their final game of the regular season. Again, that was like a really specific thing, but like this team was never like unfun to play against. And I think that's what the Blazers need, is that maybe not the personality, but the sort of physicality and the willing to mix it up that often goes hand in hand with that fiery personality. The Blazers don't need CJ McCollum telling Evan Fournier that he's as soft as those crepes you eat, an incredible line. They don't need Seth Curry telling someone that they're sassy front runners. I don't think they need Evan Turner giving the Nuggets bench the middle finger, but they do need someone like Zach Collins who would like maybe get into a fight at any moment, and then famously said a mean thing to Klay Thompson that I won't repeat in this podcast because it's a family show. But like what they need is like someone who's willing to mix it up. And I think with, Dame's not that, and you don't want him to be that. You do not want Dame to have to set the physical tone and also the skill set tone. Jeremy Grant's just not that. That's not the style of player he is. Nurk is kind of that, but he's not really that. Like he can't be a tone setter. He's like, you can't play. He's too big, plays. He can't go as hard as you need to and mix it up at his size. Like you kind of need that sort of Drew Eubanks, who's like 80 pounds lighter than Nurk, and so his engine can rev way hotter because he can just like play harder for longer because of the body type. But like Drew Eubanks, a real sort of like fiery type of personality, not quite skilled enough to be on the court. So what you need is like, Drew can play backup minutes, like I've said a bunch on this program. I'll repeat it here now. Like 12 to 15 minutes a night for Drew Eubanks, awesome. But if you can't have 12 minutes of someone coming in to set the tone, you just need more of it. You need more physicality. You need more toughness. You need more nasty, to quote Greg Popovich. And you need to be the team people don't want to play against. I don't think you need to be like the toughest, baddest group in the West, but like you need more of that skill set so you can push towards what Chauncey was selling last October. Okay, final question about how it's going to be a seller's market in the off season. Join me in that third segment, won't you? Still a pass first point guard. Still Mike Richmond. You are still listening to Locked On Blazers. Still rolling through a mailbag, answering listener submitted questions. LockedOnBlazersPod@gmail.com is the address if you want to send in a question in the future. This question comes from that very inbox. It's a question from Nathan, who did not ask a question. Instead, Nathan, a longtime emailer, kind of had a rant about frustrations with the Blazers situation, but I adapted it to a question because that's what a point guard does. Got to keep it moving, right? When folks are out of order, you got to get that ball back in your hands, and you got to make sure everyone's aligned. That's a pass first point guard. So I'm pass firsting a rant. I'm making the right pass with a rant to set it up into an actual question for the show. And Nathan says that the challenge with where the Blazers are at this summer and what they're trying to do is that there's too many buyers on the market, and it's going to be really, really, really challenging for them to accomplish their goals because there's just, quite frankly, too many buyers. And let's review their goals briefly. They have narrowed their window down to the summer of 2023 because they've spent 2 years losing, one very intentionally, one probably unintentionally, and then very intentionally in the last 20 games or so. Although I will argue that the idea that the Blazers were unintentionally bad this year is a little overstated. The roster was imperfect and obviously imperfect from the moment they said go. The GM admitted as much and then chose not to upgrade it. They might not have been bad on purpose, but they certainly weren't as good as they could have been, and they knew what they were doing. 2 years in the mud, though, with a 33, soon to be 33 in July July-year-old. He's soon to be 33 years old in July. Damian Lillard is one of the best players in franchise history, if not the best player in franchise history, and he has stated very clearly that he is not interested in building for something. He wants them to do what they need to do to cash their chips in and make the move this summer to get good, because if they're not there and they can't get it done, Dame has said pretty plainly that they will have to have difficult conversations about what's next for him and what's next for the franchise. This is not a trade mandate. This is not anything other than I want to win. I know it's hard to get there, and if we can't get there, I want to talk about what the plan is, because I don't want to sit around for the back half of my prime coming off the best season that I've ever had in the league and say yeah, it's fine. We're going to win, 38 games and we'll just try again next year. Rip City, baby. It has come to that point where the Blazers have to pick a path. They got to pick Dame's path, or they got to pick a rebuild without Dame. And they've pretty much telegraphed that they want to build around Dame. They have very, very, very plainly said in public settings that that's what they want to do. And I think there's also some reporting that suggests that that's what they want to do as well. But it ain't easy. And Damian Lillard acknowledged as much at his exit interview that is having a good plan, having folks that want to be involved in that plan, both within the Blazers organization and guys in the league outside the Blazers organization, both, everyone agreeing to, hey, this would be great if it gets done, is a long way away from it getting done. And I think that gets to Nathan's frustration. Nathan says there's too many buyers. It's a seller's market. The free agent class is not particularly strong. There are teams with assets that underachieved this year and can make a push to go a little bit deeper, who are already probably, and certainly record-wise this year. I mean, some of them unequivocally, but some of them record-wise this year, just straight up better than the Blazers, in a better spot. Memphis. They, I guess they have to decide whether they want to pay Desmond Bane or make him as a centerpiece of the big trade. But even if they don't, they've got an asset chest that's pretty darn full of picks, albeit maybe not super sexy ones because they're a good basketball team. They've got young players in the back half of the roster, role players, but young players to sort of make the money work. They've got Tyus Jones to dangle out there and all these draft picks and a pretty appealing situation. And if they throw Desmond Bane into the mix with this trade, they all of a sudden have one of the most appealing trade packages that you could find in the league. Dallas, not a whole bunch of assets, but certainly they're going to be aggressive and interested in getting stuff done. Kyrie Irving's entering free agency. Christian Wood is entering free agency. They owe some first round picks to New York and to Brooklyn. It's they're not in a great spot, but certainly they're going to be buyers and going to be aggressive in the market, and they've got Luka Doncic and all of those things. They'll be in the mix to some extent. I don't think they have the Blazers just straight up have better assets than the Mavs, but the Mavs probably are a more appealing destination. They were in the Western Conference Finals 2 years ago, and Luka Doncic is 2024. New Orleans, whole boatload of picks from the Anthony Davis trade. They've still got picks from the Drew Holiday trade. They've got a bunch of young players. And they're in a situation where they have kind of pushed to be, we want to be a team in it. We want to be in it from, that 36 win team that made the playoffs to this year missing the playoffs, but having all these injuries. And it's at some point, do they cash in to get more of what, add more? Or do they say we believe Trey Murphy is going to get there and Najee Marshall is going to continue to improve and Jose Alvarado works and all these things, or, Jackson Hayes? Or do they say, hey, let's make an aggressive move. Let's make a big play. We've got the assets to do it. And if we don't do it now, our team's going to get way too expensive. We won't be able to do it in the future. Certainly going to be one of the buyers. I think Houston could potentially be a buyer. It's hard to know. They're awful and young, but it's a lot of whispers that basically say James Harden's going back there. And if James Harden goes back there, you flip the timeline from like 23 to 33 pretty fast, 25 to 35 pretty fast. And you say like, yeah, okay, we're going to add a bunch of other vets and they're going to be aggressive and they would have cap space to do so. I think Brooklyn could be in that mix of like a team that's like trying to make the moves. Brooklyn, they have kind of underwhelming picks, but they got a bunch of draft picks. They have a good team, like a 500 level, slightly above 500 level team, and a really good player in Mikal Bridges. They need, and Nick Claxton's really good too. And it's like they need to kind of figure out what they're doing. Cam Johnson's entering free agency. They've got a whole bunch of 3-and-D wings that like are appealing, and they can be a team that kind of pushes their chips in to get an upgrade. I don't think they have like a true star upgrade because they just have the mess of the Ben Simmons contract on the roster that's kind of screwing up the plan because nobody wants that, including your Portland Trailblazers. So they're a team that's at least going to try to be a buyer. And so if you've got those 5 teams, and I don't think all of those teams have better assets than the Blazers, I'm just saying like off the top of my head, making a quick list and kind of laying it out for you, there are more teams that are going to be buyers in a market with a weak free agent class and maybe not a bunch of stars on the move that make what the Blazers want to do challenging. If every team is calling the Toronto Raptors to try to get Pascal Siakam and OG Anunoby, it makes the Blazers offer have more challenges, right? It's just naturally going to have more challenges. Now, the 3rd pick in the draft in Anthony Simons is a pretty appealing package to a lot of teams, depending on what their goals are. It could be very appealing to a team kind of wanting to reset a little bit. But you have to find the right trade partner. And I think this is Nathan's frustration, is that the Blazers find themselves in a difficult spot. In a difficult spot because the market is going to be rich with teams that are trying to do what the Blazers are doing, some more equipped, some less equipped, but certainly everyone interested and getting involved, and that's going to make the trade market, again, particularly in a year with like not a great free agent class, going to make the trade market super, super, super tough to navigate, and the Blazers' basically only path to upgrade the roster is the trade market, via the trade market. It's going to be fascinating. Last question to close the show. This quote comes from @RevDrBeals on Twitter, who asks, what are some important catchphrases and buzzwords to pay attention to for the Blazers over the summer? Listen, back in the Neil Olshey days, the Blazers, like Neil just had like words he would say, in a vacuum. Deal structures, fluid, all these things. I don't think Joe Cronin has the same thing, but the one thing, aggressive, build around Damian Lillard, upgrade. He's big on talent. We want to get really, really good players, is what he says. That's what we need, is really, really good players. So really, really good, upgrade, aggressive, build around Damian Lillard. And also an important one to note, referring to Damian Lillard as Damian by his name, by his full first name. I love that one from Joe. Those are the buzzwords to look out for, because that's like, this is a quick question to close the show, but like that's what it's all about for this team, is they think they can pivot and build around Dame and build around him super quickly. They have narrowed their window to this summer. If they don't get it done this summer, they're going to put themselves in a situation where they've either overpaid and are bad and are in a made a bunch of overpays because it's a buyer's market or seller's market rather. They've overpaid to add vets that don't really work, or they're just not going to be able to get stuff done and they're going to be in a difficult situation, or they're going to freaking nail it. Like they're going to nail it. I think Joe Cronin's done pretty well to kind of tear this thing down and give himself a chance. It's just time has caught up with him, and now his chance is like really narrow to get it done. And so, build around Damian, aggressive, upgrade the roster, really, really good players are all the buzzwords to put on your bingo card, and maybe create a media day, or whenever he does his next public interview with Joe Cronin, a juice drinking game, so you can load up on apple juice or other delicious fruit juices, because again, this is a family show. That is going to do it for today's episode. Come back for more this week. I appreciate you listening. I'll talk to you soon.